January 10th, 2002. A 19-year-old girl wakes up on her parents' couch in Georgetown, Texas, which is actually about a 20-minute drive from where I'm sitting right now. Georgetown is a small town where people ride horses down country roads and nobody locks their doors. She puts on her running shoes, her yellow Walkman, and heads out for a 4-mile loop she'd been running since she was a kid.
She never came home. And 24 years later, yes, 24 years, nobody has been charged. Nobody has been held accountable. And Rachel Cooke's family still doesn't know what happened to their daughter.
Today, we're talking about Rachel Cooke, a girl full of energy, with a big heart, big plans, and her whole life in front of her. This one is going to stick with you. I'm Gina.
And I'm Amber.
And this is Weird True Crime.
Before we get into what happened, we want you to know who Rachel was. Rachel Louise Cooke was born on May 10th, 1983, and grew up in Georgetown, Texas, just outside of Austin. She was raised by her parents, Robert and Janet, and had a younger sister named Joanne.
And Rachel was she sounds like an absolute force. Her dad, Robert, described her as someone who could never get enough done in a day. I wish I knew what that was like. Her mom, Janet, said she had an open heart and was very trusting. That kind of person who just makes every room a little brighter, you know?
She was a runner, like a serious one. She started running in elementary school, and once she realized she was beating most of the boys, she decided she was in it for the long haul. She ran long-distance track and cross-country at Georgetown High School. Running wasn't just exercise for Rachel. It was just part of who she was.
She graduated from Georgetown High School and moved out to San Diego, California, where she was attending San Diego Mesa College. She worked at a bakery and at Hooters to support herself, and she had this adorable little habit of giving leftover donuts from the bakery to unhoused people in Balboa Park. That's just the kind of person that she was.
She was planning to transfer to a college in Los Angeles to study fashion design, which honestly tracks, because her family described her as being totally into fashion and shopping. She had a new boyfriend named Greg, who she had brought home for the holidays. Her family loved him. Rachel told them she thought he was the one. They were planning to move in together and get engaged.
So Rachel was home in Georgetown for winter break. She had actually extended her trip to attend her cousin's wedding. Her boyfriend Greg had already headed back home by New Year's, so she was solo at her parents' house. The morning of January 10th, 2002, the rest of the family got up and headed out. Janet to her teaching job at Georgetown High School, Robert to IBM, and her sister Joanne to school.
Rachel was asleep on the couch when they left. Janet said goodbye to her around 8 a.m. Then at 9:15, Rachel got a call from Greg. They had a totally normal conversation, said, "I miss you," made plans. Rachel told him she was going to go for a run around the neighborhood and would call him back when she got home.
After that call, she got dressed in gray sweatpants, a green athletic top, her Asics running shoes, and grabbed her yellow Walkman with the sporty headphones. And she headed out on that route she had been running since she was a kid. This wasn't some new path. This was deeply familiar home turf territory for her.
She never called Greg back. When the family came home that afternoon, Rachel wasn't there. At first, it wasn't immediately alarming, but then Robert noticed that all of Rachel's belongings were still in the house. Her cell phone, her purse, and in the living room, she had lined up several of her dresses and shoes, like she had been trying to pick out an outfit for the wedding.
He called her best friend Shannon, who she'd been friends with since they were 5 years old, to ask if Rachel was with her. Shannon said no, but they had plans to hang out that evening, and she hadn't heard from Rachel. Shannon told investigators later that Rachel never went anywhere without her personal belongings, and especially not without her makeup.
The family initially thought she might have gotten a ride to Wildfire, a restaurant where she occasionally picked up shifts when she was in town. Someone had told them she was scheduled to work that night, so they assumed she got a ride and left her stuff at home. But when Rachel still wasn't back the next morning, they called Wildfire again, and that's when they found out there had been a mix-up. It was a different Rachel who was scheduled that night, not their Rachel.
Robert drove around her entire jogging route, looking to see if she'd been hit by a car and was on the side of the road. Janet called local hospitals. Nothing. The only clothes missing from her room were the ones she was wearing when she left. And by that point, it had been over 24 hours since she walked out the door.
On January 11th, Robert and Janet went to the Williamson County Sheriff's Office to report Rachel missing. And this is where things get really frustrating, because her family felt like they were not taken seriously at all. Joanne, Rachel's younger sister, said later in the documentary Disappeared that she felt like they were brushed off completely.
Yeah, they were told things like, it's probably nothing. And she's a young girl. She probably went out to party and didn't tell anyone. How many times have we heard this story? Yeah. And Robert said investigators even suggested she might be in Mexico with her boyfriend and would be home any minute. Her boyfriend, who was on the phone with her that morning in another state. Yeah.
Make it make sense.
I know.
And this is something the Cooke family later spoke out about directly. Rachel, being 19 at the time of her disappearance, impacted how her case was handled. There is age discrimination in missing persons cases, and this family experienced it firsthand. A 19-year-old woman with no car, no money, no clothes, no phone, no purse, who left to go for a run, and the response was she probably went to party. Okay.
At what, 10:30 in the morning? Okay, on a Thursday. And I want to note here that a neighbor had seen Rachel on Natchez Trail around 10:30 or 11 a.m., just cooling down after her run, walking a few blocks from her house. We're talking no more than 300 yards. Nobody heard any screaming, no disturbance. Whatever happened to Rachel happened quickly, and it happened very close to home.
When the sheriff's office hadn't made any real moves by Friday evening, the Cooke family took matters into their own hands. They organized their own search party for Saturday morning with friends, neighbors, and community members. Neighbors even offered up their horses to cover more rugged terrain.
Around noon on Saturday, an investigator showed up and actually stopped the search, citing concern about trampling a potential crime scene, which, okay, fair point in theory, but the timing of that response is hard to sit with. Meanwhile, Rachel's cousin's wedding went on as planned that same evening in Marble Falls. The congregation said a special prayer for Rachel at the end of the ceremony. When I first found this information, I thought it was odd that they would have gone ahead with the ceremony, but then thinking about it more, there's so much planning and time and money that goes into something like this. Even if they wanted to postpone it at that point, it was way too late.
Probably not feasible. And,
Yeah,
kind of at that point, they really still didn't know what was going on.
Mm-mm.
So, it could have been something innocent that Rachel had just disappeared for or something. There was just no telling. So, yeah, I completely understand.
Mm.
On Sunday, January 13th, Texas Ranger Matthew Lindeman joined the investigation, and the family held a press conference in front of their home. Janet stood in front of cameras and said something that, honestly, I had to stop and breathe when I read this. She said, quote, "If somebody out there does have her, if you could find it in your heart, let her mama have her baby back." End quote. Oof, that got me.
I know. On Monday, January 14th, around 230 people turned out to search, including students from Georgetown High School and Robert's colleagues from IBM. They covered 50 square miles around the neighborhood, combing through Russell Park, Jim Hogg Park, and Cedar Breaks. Nothing was found.
On January 16th, police put out a bolo for a white car with a black stripe along the bottom, possibly a Trans Am that had been spotted near the Cooke home on the morning Rachel disappeared. 2 young men between 17 and 21 were seen in the car. Investigators believe they might know something. By the end of January, Texas EquiSearch joined the efforts, bringing around 20 members and asking the public to volunteer. They searched for 2 weeks, and yet they found nothing.
One of the things that really stands out in Rachel's case is how hard her family and community fought for her, not just in the early days, but for years. In February 2002, over 100 volunteers drove all over Central Texas in an event called Ride for Rachel, posting flyers in 100 towns. The idea was inspired by one of Robert's coworkers, who overheard a colleague say he wanted to hop on his Harley Davidson and post flyers from Oklahoma to Mexico.
By this point, the reward had grown to $50,000. They were giving out flyers with Rachel's physical description and her tattoos: 2 heart-shaped cherries on her left shoulder and a black star on her left foot. In April 2002, a 5K was held at Old Settlers Park in Round Rock, specifically because that's where Rachel ran cross-country in high school. All proceeds went to her search fund.
Even while searching for his own daughter, Robert Cooke reached out to help another father, Greg Allen, whose 5-year-old daughter Sabrina had gone missing. Robert shared what he'd learned: how to set up a reward, how to build a website, how to keep a case visible. It says everything about the kind of people the Cookes were.
In July 2002, the Williamson County Sheriff's Department launched a new software program named in Rachel's honor, the Rachel Alert. When anyone was reported missing, a notification was sent to law enforcement and media outlets within a 100-mile radius. It wasn't perfect. Local broadcast networks still didn't interrupt programming to issue alerts like the Amber Alert system did, but it was something, and it was named for her.
In October 2002, Robert and Janet were invited to the White House for a conference on missing, exploited, and runaway children, the first event of its kind hosted by President Bush. Robert used that platform to push for a federal task force and to advocate for the FBI to take older youth cases more seriously, because at the time, the FBI was far more likely to respond to cases involving young children. But Rachel was 19, and that mattered in ways it never should have.
In August 2006, 4.5 years after Rachel disappeared, there was what appeared to be a massive break in the case. A 30-year-old convicted murderer named Michael Keith Moore admitted to killing Rachel. Investigators had been looking at him for a suspect for over a year, and his confession was detailed, specific. He described following her on her run, approaching her at his truck, hitting her with a hammer, and later disposing of her body in the Gulf of Mexico near Matagorda Bay.
The Williamson County Sheriff at the time said Moore's confession contained things that only the person responsible could have known. He said, and I want to be careful quoting this correctly, the sheriff described it as completely obvious that Moore had to have been there and that the confession was in all likelihood true. The Department of Public Safety sent divers to search the area near Matagorda Bay, but nothing was recovered.
A deal was reached. Moore would plead guilty, serve a life sentence alongside the 4 he was already serving for another murder, a 14-week pregnant woman named Christina Moore, which there was no relation, whom he killed in Round Rock in 2003. And he would lead investigators to physical evidence. Rachel's family agreed to this deal. They were just ready for answers.
On November 10th, 2006, Michael Moore walked into court and pleaded not guilty. He completely backed out of the deal. The Cooke family said they felt like they were being victimized all over again.
I can't even imagine being blindsided like that.
Thinking we're finally going to get some sort of justice here, and then sit there and have him say not guilty after years of trying to get a conviction for this man. Just insane.
And then 7 months later, Moore gave an interview to the Austin American-Statesman from prison and said he made the whole thing up. He said investigators got him talking, he played along, and he was getting special treatment in exchange. Extra visits with his ex-wife, prison infractions wiped from his record, da-da-da-da-da. He later apologized to the Cooke family, saying he could imagine them thinking their daughter just disappeared again right there in that court. Robert Cooke said the apology was hollow.
I don't see how you could take any sort of apology he could give to heart. He was just in it for his own game. And I read somewhere that in one of the articles that the FBI agent that was working the case at the time came and talked to him and had mentioned Rachel. He was like, "Have you heard of Rachel Cooke?" And basically, quote unquote, baited him into saying he did it. And he was like, "Well, if I say I did it, I'm going to get all this stuff out of it. So there's something in it for me, so I might as well just go along with it." And he's going to sit here and act like he gave two shits about how it's going to make the family feel.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to my point, investigators describe Moore as a narcissist who craved attention and liked to toy with people in authority. Robert Cooke said it best. Quote, "He's a predator, and that's part of the way he goes after people. He is definitely still a suspect, but based on his history, how much of what he says can you believe? And that's a question that still doesn't have a clean answer."
After Moore's false confession, the trail went cold. In January 2009, Janet Cooke told the Austin American-Statesman, quote, "We know no more now than we knew that first day, and that's got to change," end quote. A billboard went up on I-35, paid for by Reagan Outdoor Advertising. Rachel's face on the highway with numbers for the sheriff's office and Crime Stoppers.
By the 10-year anniversary in 2012, Robert lived in New York for work, and Janet was still in Georgetown, though not in the same house. Tragically, the stress of everything had cost them their marriage. They divorced a few years after Rachel disappeared. Robert's sisters, Elaine and Diane, were still printing posters and T-shirts and maintaining a website. Elaine said something at a family event that I can't stop thinking about. Do we say Rachel is or Rachel was?
Over the years, there were other heartbreaking moments. Remains found near a drainage culvert 10 miles from the neighborhood. A skull found by fishermen at Lake Georgetown. Bones found on Cameron Road. Every single time, the Cooke family held their breath. Every single time, the remains weren't Rachel's. And every single time, they had to grieve all over again. God, all the way on Cameron Road?
Mm-hmm.
For anybody that doesn't live here in Austin, like, that is south.
Very south.
Very south. And Georgetown is way more north of Austin.
Mm-hmm. But I think at that point, there were like any sort of remains. That
definitely.
Came up. It didn't, I think as soon as they found them, they would call the family. And so the family got to the point where they were terrified every time the phone rang because it was like, are we going to get our hopes up again?
Yet
and
again.
just to find out that it was never hers. And I think the skull found at Lake Georgetown ended up being hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. But of course, what do before anthropologists look at it? They call the family and say, "Hey, we found a skull at Lake Georgetown."
That's not the done thing. You don't do that.
No, I feel like you get a little more information before you call a family and tell them that they found something that might be beneficial.
I feel like, or I hope that's the current protocol.
Yeah, that maybe they've learned. It would be interesting to dive a little bit into that and see how that's handled, or talk to people we know within the space that have dealt with these kinds of cases to see how those things are handled. In 2017, a new sheriff assembled a fresh investigative team of retired homicide investigators to look at Rachel's case, alongside other unsolved Williamson County cases. A tip came in that summer about possible remains near the San Gabriel River. FBI agents and sheriff's officials spent hours digging, but there was nothing. Then, in 2018, investigators recovered a white Trans Am in Dallas, the same type of vehicle spotted near Rachel's home the day she disappeared. It was tied to 3 or 4 people of interest, but no useful DNA was found.
In November 2014, Robert Cooke died at 59 years old from liver disease. His brother told the statement that Robert had said more than once that his goal in life was to see Rachel found and brought home before he died. He wanted his own funeral to be one last opportunity to promote awareness of missing persons, including Rachel. The poor father died while still searching.
And Janet has survived both kidney cancer and skin cancer. Joanne, Rachel's little sister, went on to earn both a bachelor's and master's degree in social work from UT and moved to New Mexico. Janet eventually went back to teaching art at Georgetown High School and retired in 2012. They have kept living. They have kept going, but they have never stopped looking.
In January 2026, this year, on the 24th anniversary of Rachel's disappearance, Williamson County law enforcement released a statement and gave interviews to local news. The lead detective on her case is now Detective Mark McKinney. He told KXAN News, quote, "This case is not sitting on a shelf somewhere collecting dust. We're working on it every day," end quote.
McKinney revealed that investigators are currently using advances in DNA technology and are actively waiting on lab results. He also shared something really significant. He believes Rachel probably knew, or at least knew of, her abductor. That's not nothing. That's investigators telling us they at least have some sort of direction.
Williamson County Sheriff Matthew Lindeman, who is also the same Texas Ranger who joined the investigation back in 2002, told KXAN, quote, "If there's someone out there that has information, no matter how important they think it is or not, we really appreciate if they would call the sheriff's office," end quote.
So, if you're listening to this and you were in Georgetown, Texas in January of 2002, if you saw something or heard something, or if someone in your life has said something that stuck with you, please call the Williamson County Sheriff's Office. Rachel's family has been waiting 24 years. Her mom is still alive, and her sister is still alive, and they deserve answers.
Rachel Cooke was 19 years old. She was a runner, a dreamer, a loyal friend, a caring daughter, and a woman with a whole future planned out. She was going to study fashion design. She was going to move in with the guy she loved. She gave donuts to strangers because it was the right thing to do. She was real, and she mattered, and she still matters.
If you want to learn more about Rachel's case, we'll link the Williamson County Sheriff's Office tip line in our show notes, along with the KXAN and KVUE coverage from the 24th anniversary. And if you haven't seen the investigation discovery episode, Disappeared, Running for Her Life, it's worth watching. Do you remember when this happened?
I don't, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah.
My parents watched the news all the time. Like every night they turned on the local news. And I was a junior in high school in 2002, so you were a sophomore, obviously. I remember when this happened.
I don't. I had my head too far up my ass, so.
No, and that's fine. I was just like, I was surrounded by this kind of stuff all the time. And so that's why I heard about it. But I was just like, I remember being very taken aback then because she was so close to our age and she just went missing while out on a jog. And at that point in my life, I hadn't really heard about anything like this ever happening.
No.
Because, we were in our safe little bubble. But this was right down the street from us, basically.
Basically a stone's throw from our little world. And yeah. Now 2002, sophomore in high school, my grandmother wasn't living here at the time. So, and she is who I always used to watch that kind of stuff with. So
yeah,
I never.
No. And we would spend summers at Jim Hog Park because my grandparents would bring their RV there. And so it's really strange to me that that's the area that she was in when she went missing.
I was going to say that, like, when we talk about other cases, or if I listen to another case and somebody says something about a different location, maybe in a different state, or I'm like, oh, hey, I know that area. I'm familiar with that. It hits a little harder and weirder when it's literally your own stomping grounds.
And I think this is why this case has stuck with me for as long as it has, because it's like the yogurt shop case. It's literally happened
Right here.
during our childhood. And like the yogurt shop case, I'm really hoping that with as far as DNA has come, that we'll see
Something.
the same sort of result here that
Yep.
we did then, and we'll get some answers, because God, poor Janet. And they still have a memorial at Georgetown High School at a tree that they planted on the first year anniversary. Every year they have the same memorial at Georgetown High School at that tree.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's a bummer. And I really hope in the next couple years, especially if they're currently waiting for test results, that we get some sort of
something.
And I don't understand, there was no other information I could find about that car they found in Dallas either. It was so weird. It's like they found it and they talked about it on the news for half a second, and then you never heard anything else about it.
Maybe that's something that they're still actively working with. That's what
It
they're
could
waiting on
be.
lab results with. Who knows?
It could be. But it's just, there's so many unanswered questions here. And the whole fact that this loser, Michael Moore, would take it upon himself to say, oh, yeah, I killed her, and give this gruesome explanation of what he did to her, and he just made it up, and the family had to relive that all over again.
That's the frustrating part, like the truly, truly frustrating part about that. Like,
Yeah.
Criminals, they're a criminal for a reason. Like they lie, they're deceitful, but putting a family through that kind of torture all over again just for funsies.
For his own benefit.
Yep.
He had nothing left to lose. He was already spending 4 life sentences in prison.
Yep.
So he's like, oh, well, I just need something to entertain myself, so yeah. And then the family's back to square one. It's just awful. Yeah, I definitely recommend, if you're not familiar with this case, looking into it, because we're still looking for answers over here.
Well, we will be back next week with another one. Until then,
stay safe
and make good choices. Bye.
Bye.